The laughter cut through the marble lobby like broken glass, sharp and humiliating, echoing beneath chandeliers that had witnessed billion-dollar deals and quiet betrayals, and in that moment everyone turned to look at the tired single dad standing near the security desk, his jacket slightly worn, his daughter's small hand clutching his sleeve, as he calmly stated that he was the new owner of the building, a claim so unexpected that even the air seemed to pause before the disbelief erupted. If stories about second chances, quiet strength, and kindness hidden behind ordinary faces mean something to you, take a second right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from, because what unfolds next is a reminder that life often saves its biggest truths for the most underestimated souls. Ethan Carter had learned long ago that silence was safer than explanation, that letting people assume the worst was easier than fighting their laughter, and as the echo of mocking smiles followed him across the polished floor, his thoughts drifted not to anger but to the long road that had brought him here. He was 38, a widowed father of a 7-year-old girl named Lily, and every line on his face carried a memory of late nights, unpaid bills, and promises whispered beside a hospital bed years earlier when his wife slipped away and left him holding a future he didn't know how to afford. The world had not been gentle since then. He had worked night shifts, sold his car, skipped meals so Lily could eat, and carried the invisible weight of being both mother and father, teacher and protector, while people around him often saw only a man who looked perpetually exhausted and out of place among wealth and power. The building he stood in that day was the crown jewel of Aurora Holdings, a glass tower overlooking the river, owned by a woman whose name appeared regularly in financial magazines and charity galas. Victoria Langford was known as a self-made billionaire with a reputation for brilliance and ruthlessness, admired for her sharp mind and feared for her intolerance of weakness. She had inherited nothing but debt, or so the stories said, and turned it into an empire, and when she laughed that day, it wasn't out of cruelty alone but habit, the reflex of someone accustomed to being right and untouchable. To her, Ethan looked like another lost visitor, perhaps a contractor who wandered into the wrong meeting, another reminder that not everyone belonged in rooms where power decided fate. What Victoria didn't know was that Ethan had once belonged to rooms like this, long before life broke him down into someone unrecognizable even to himself. A decade earlier, he had been a rising star in private equity, the kind of quiet genius who preferred numbers over applause, who saw patterns others missed and invested with patience rather than ego. He had walked away from it all when Lily was born prematurely and his wife's health declined, choosing hospital chairs over boardrooms, a decision that cost him promotions, partnerships, and eventually his marriage to the career he thought defined him. By the time tragedy struck, he was already on the outside, and returning seemed impossible while grief hollowed him out. Years passed in survival mode, but beneath the exhaustion, Ethan never stopped watching, learning, thinking. He invested what little he could, quietly and anonymously, through trusts and old connections who owed him favors they never fully understood. He studied markets during lunch breaks, built strategies on scrap paper, and slowly, almost invisibly, rebuilt a foundation no one around him noticed because his clothes were cheap and his priorities were not loud. When Lily asked why he worked so hard, he told her he was building something invisible, something that would one day give them room to breathe. The opportunity that led him back into Aurora Tower came disguised as a disaster. Aurora Holdings was drowning under debt masked by confidence, its public image flawless while internal numbers told a different story. Victoria, brilliant as she was, had expanded too fast, trusting growth to outrun risk, and when markets shifted, the cracks widened. Ethan saw it coming months before analysts did, and through a series of calculated moves, he acquired controlling interest through a consortium that bore no name anyone recognized. Each signature was deliberate, each step quiet, because Ethan had learned that real power rarely announces itself until it's too late to stop. Standing there with Lily, facing laughter and disbelief, Ethan felt the familiar urge to shrink, to apologize for existing in a space that didn't welcome him. But then Lily squeezed his hand, her eyes wide not with fear but curiosity, and he remembered the nights she had slept on his chest while he calculated futures by the glow of a phone screen. He remembered the promise he made to never let the world teach her that worth was determined by appearance or approval. That promise steadied him more than any confidence money could buy. When the documents were finally presented, when the room shifted from amusement to confusion, then to silence, the transformation was almost physical. Pages were turned, names traced, percentages calculated, and the truth emerged with an undeniable weight. The signature at the bottom was his, clear and final, backed by legal authority and irreversible ownership. The laughter died not because of anger but because reality had arrived, uninvited and absolute. Victoria's smile froze, then faded, replaced by something she rarely felt in public spaces, uncertainty. What followed was not triumph but reflection. Ethan didn't gloat or raise his voice. He didn't demand apologies or savor humiliation. Instead, he looked around at the room that once would have welcomed him and realized how little it mattered now. Ownership, he understood, was not about control but responsibility, about deciding what kind of future a place like this would shape. He thought of employees fearing layoffs, of families tied to paychecks, of the invisible cost behind corporate ambition, and for the first time in years, he felt not the weight of survival but the gravity of purpose. Victoria, confronted with the collapse of assumptions she had built her empire on, was forced to see the man she had dismissed not as an intruder but as a mirror. She saw in Ethan the version of herself she had buried long ago, the one who once struggled and swore never to be weak again. The realization was painful and humbling, and while pride burned, so did respect. In that silence, something shifted not just between them, but within the walls that had heard too much arrogance and too little empathy. Ethan's first decisions as owner surprised everyone. He halted planned layoffs, restructured debt with long-term stability in mind, and introduced policies that valued people over optics. He insisted on childcare support for employees, flexible schedules, and mental health resources, changes that analysts scoffed at but workers felt immediately. The building didn't just change ownership, it changed tone, breathing room replacing constant pressure, trust replacing fear. And slowly, profits followed. Not because of cruelty sharpened into efficiency but because people worked better when treated like humans. At home, life changed too, though not overnight. Ethan still cooked simple meals, still walked Lily to school, still fixed things himself because habits formed in scarcity don't disappear with money. But there was laughter now, real laughter, and weekends without dread. Lily drew pictures of tall buildings with windows shaped like hearts, and when she told her classmates her dad owned a tower, she said it the same way she said he made the best pancakes, as if both were equally important. As the story spread beyond boardrooms and headlines, it became less about wealth and more about timing, about how life sometimes breaks people down not to punish them but to strip away everything unnecessary so they can rebuild on truth. Ethan didn't become powerful the day he signed papers. He became powerful the day he chose love over ambition, patience over pride, and quiet perseverance over public approval. The signature simply revealed what had been growing unseen all along.